Well, I neglected to do my ordinary introduction to you today, honey. But welcome, as the sign says behind me, to Jeju. We are on the island and on the city in the northern half of the island for the most part. And I really don't know what to expect. I think of this from the research that I had as having a somewhat separate culture, like the Okinawans, Ryukyuans, and all that, to Japan. But they've been part of Korea here for a much longer period of time, so there's almost nothing left of the Tenma civilization. So what am I gonna find here? No idea. So our first stop is at the Heritage Museum, and we've got to make this fairly quick and regimented, as we've got 4 stops in 4 hours. So I'm not sure how much we're going to be able to look around, but with a museum like this, there may be some difficulty in being able to even read everything. So hurrying through it may be a little bit like running through the Vatican Museum, but also a little bit like passing by a lot of stuff that's written in a language I can't read. So I wouldn't be losing anything from trying. And for the first time in our trip so far, we're actually arriving as the cherry blossoms flower. So we've got a huge little valley out here of them coming into bloom. So it's quite the picture. The museum has quite an extensive collection of animals native to Jeju, including migratory birds and the like. Some, like this condor, are stuffed and taxidermied. Others are shown as skeletons, and I don't know if you can see it, but this turtle proves that you can't separate the turtle from the shell. It's part of its skeleton. It's not a house, it's its body. So don't try to get him out of there. Apart from the lack of modern conveniences, the traditional house in Jeju looks fairly capacious. Your average apartment dweller in Seoul should only be so lucky to have so much room. They also have a couple of examples of the traditional fishing vessels. They aren't exactly large, but they get the job done. These are called Taewu rafts. And again, these are the ones they take out back in the day. And your mom would recognize this process all too well, I'm sure. Slightly more rudimentary loom, but again, it does the job perfectly well. They were growing cotton and weaving it into fabric back in the ancient days. Among their cultural customs is that of the Hwangam, or 60th birthday party, which apparently is propitious in the ancient days when not everyone reached 60. But the party would only be held if the individual spouse and family were still alive. So I'll leave that without further comment. In going through the folklore section of the museum, I noticed one thing about a certain celebration that took place in midwinter, early February, that had been suppressed with the Japanese occupation and not revived until virtually the end of the millennium. A lot of Korean culture has been lost due to occupation, it would seem. At first I thought this was just a slightly smaller version of one of the thatched homes, but it turns out this one's a specialty, serves a special purpose insofar as it's basically a mill. They'd have a horse in here grinding grain by turning a millstone around and just pressing the grain, grinding it to flour. I honestly thought I had made a circuit in the entire place, and then I found downstairs is an entire exhibit of marine life. Starting out with the biggest whales, and then moving on to smaller fish. Both around the world and in Jeju. And now I take that back about smaller fish. There are some exhibitions here of very large creatures as well. Fortunately, given our limited time, it's a rather quick trip through. And while I can't say that we've covered it all, we've covered a good enough distance that I can be satisfied with where we've been and still make it to the bus on time. I admit to not liking having to be so time conscious, but I also understand it because we only have so much here in Jeju as compared to many of our stops. We're taking off from here at about 3 or 4 in order to make it to Seoul on time. So there's that. You do get a chance, like I said, to see the cherry blossoms. This is really quite lovely. I don't know if we're going to be able to see these in Japan, but at least we've gotten to see some of them here. So there's that. I know last year when we were in Japan at about this time, most of them had come and gone. So to spot a few of them is really a nice thing. I'm going to have to ask our guide about these fruits and see if they're that local breed of mandarin grapefruit or whatever that I'd read about. And if we can find some of those in the traditional market when we get to our last stop. But this should be it for now, and we move on to our next stop,